Welcome to the first class on generative AI. Today we'll be exploring what generative AI is. In subsequent sessions, we'll be looking at generative legal AI, the risks and benefits of generative AI, prompt engineering, AI and legal ethics, and even more. Let's start with the framework. AI is constantly changing. Although ChatGPT came to the public on November 30th of 2022, things are rapidly changing. ChatGPT is now somewhat dated, and we have GPT-4. Bing has an AI product that everyone can use and will soon be integrated into Microsoft Office. We expect almost every app, whether on your phone or on the internet, will have aspects of generative AI. Before going on, it's important to note that this capability of creating content, and we're going to go more into that, has substantial economic and environmental impacts. So don't forget that this is costing someone a lot of energy and a lot of money, and those are challenges that society will face as a whole as we move forward. I expect that it will get cheaper and better because there is such demand. But for now, the costs are substantial to provide what seems like a free service. Are you feeling uncertain about AI more generally? Like, what is it? How is it really going to affect things? Well, you're not out of the norm. Even the experts don't fully understand AI and how it is going to affect our lives. Some people see it as a bounty that will improve life for everyone. Other people see it as tools that will only be available to the wealthy and the powerful. Nobody really knows what's coming, so it's reasonable that we don't know either. AI could be a catalyst for inequality in the law if only certain litigants have access to these tools and they become important. Or maybe with AI, pro se litigants can overwhelm the courts and get things done that they could not have otherwise gotten done due to limitations and access to justice concerns. Whatever you're feeling about AI, I promise you are not alone. We are at a moment in time when no one fully understands its capabilities and where it will take society. This is an example of a hype curve, and it's traditionally used to talk about technologies over time. So we start out, for some people it was before 2022, for other people it's at different points. It doesn't matter where you are on this curve. But for many people, there's a period of euphoria and excitement, not just at its novelty, but you imagine it will change the world and change everything you do. Then, as things become more challenging, or you start to use the tools, or maybe you just imagine the downsides, you'll end up on this trough of disillusionment, thinking, gosh, that was really a big nothing burger. And then finally, there's some slope at which we start to implement these tools and they become part of our daily lives, and we wonder what we could have done without them. And we realize that, in some ways we're better off, in some ways we're worse off, but it's not an all or nothing proposition. As someone mentioned just recently, AI is only going to improve. We don't expect it to get worse. So if you think about where we are now in time, expect it will get better over time. First of all, AI is not new. Generative AI is what's new. AI has been around for a long time in a relative sense and is used in many of the products that you use on a daily basis, whether it's smart searching or whether it's for your microwave to know when your green beans are done, whatever the case may be. There are a lot of tools that are fuzzy logic or data retrieval tools. The big deal here is that generative AI is creating content that never existed. For all those other tools, what they're doing is they're finding things or using an algorithm to solve a problem. But they're not really creating new algorithms or creating new content that never existed. So what's new now is that you can actually write a paper, so to speak, by asking a prompt and having it generate content, and those words in that sequence never existed before. So, if you think about this, AI has ingested, these large companies have ingested information. They have taken art, They have taken words, they have taken laws, they have taken content from Reddit, uh, from Wikipedia, all of these different sources, and they have ingested them into a large database that enables them to predict what word will come next. But it's important to note that these include offensive terms, hate speech, and many divergent points of view. So these systems have built-in biases that are inherent to humanity and whatever the content is trained on, and we can't ignore that. We'll talk about the copyright issues later, whether that ingestion is fair use or not, but for now we can say that the companies did it, and what we're dealing with is what comes out of these black boxes, while knowing that some of what went into them is linguistically valid, but potentially garbage in content. So one way to think of generative AI is to think of a Google search. When you enter a Google search and you enter the first word, it's going to give you a proposed next word. What generative AI does is that on a larger scale, it's mathematically calculating what is the most likely word to come next and filling that in a sort of a sequence of words that it knows are naturally go with each other. So you can imagine it as an autocomplete for a word, then a sentence, then a paragraph, then a page. And in this context, you also have the capability to not only think about it in words, but also in images, in sound, video creation. And what multimodal means is that I can write a text prompt. I can ask it to write a movie about, and then write a paragraph, and it can generate moving pictures and images based on the text. So it isn't just text to text or image to image, but it can translate between media. So here's an example. We have the text, the images are all going through this process. They're all going into what we'll call the foundational model, which is the large language model. And then it can be used for all of these different purposes. So in the copyright context, the argument of the people making the foundational model is that these are all transformative uses. They're not replicating the text or images or speech. They're enabling you to use their tools to figure out what food you have in your refrigerator and therefore what recipes you can make with the food you have. Or to figure out if a letter is angry or sad based on the words that that person used. So this is the framework through which all of these systems are operating. The other thing about this is that it's becoming integrated into daily life faster than we could ever imagine. There are examples of the smart glasses, pendants, pins, other tools that are going to be storing information and being retrievable on a regular basis. So this could include internal documents. It could include legal research and database content. It could include Gmails and texts, anything on your computer, but it also includes the faces of the people that you see on a daily basis, or their voices and voice recognition. So there are a host of complicated ethical issues, but I think that we should all be prepared for the possibility of basically omnipresent recording in the next couple of years. So in this case, what we have is an image of a refrigerator taken by a camera, and people are talking about these cameras being built into refrigerators, where it is now scanning, and it can tell you in this refrigerator what you have. It can tell you what is outdated. It can tell you what you need to purchase that is normally there but missing. And it can also tell you what foods, meals you can make with the content of your refrigerator. So this is a pretty cool application that combines vision and text and the data of a recipe bank, all to provide a service that's pretty cool. I want to raise red flags because I think there are concerns about all these systems and relying on them too heavily. There are cases where if you were to use the system as a mushroom foraging tool, it might tell you incorrectly that a certain mushroom is not poisonous and you should put it into risotto and eat it. But that might be a terrible idea if it's a poisonous mushroom. So I encourage you to have skepticism for quite a while about how much you rely on these tools in your daily basis. Um, don't do anything that you wouldn't do normally just because a computer says you can or should. And in the next section, we'll talk about lawyers who relied on AI and should not have. So remember your professional responsibilities as well as not risking your life on a mushroom. We'll talk about art only tangentially. This is an input. Basically, I asked for it to combine books and tacos and create images. And here is a library, the taco library. So you can consider it a bookshelf, or you could consider it a consumable of knowledge. But I just wanted to show the possibility. None of these images have ever existed. They were created on the fly just for me based on a text prompt. Now, many of you have heard of ChatGPT, and it's probably the most commonly used tool because it's free and because you can chat with it. But there are many other tools that you might have heard of. Bard, Bing now uses GPT-4, so it's actually a better model than ChatGPT, and I recommend if you want to play around with this, that you use Bing.com for now, because they're subsidizing your usage of the better system than ChatGPT. But you'll hear about many others. They're all in this class of tools called large language models. And it's those large language models that have ingested all this content and are able to generate all these spin-off functions, we'll call them. And we're already seeing it integrated into Office and Slack, but it's clear that it's going to be integrated into phones, into smart devices of all sorts, whether it's in a specialized environment or more generalized. Your television will likely have it, for example, if you have a television. So let's talk about what GPT means. We've talked about it a bunch, but we've kind of skimmed over what those letters, why are they even there? So GPT stands for 3 words. It stands for generative, which is new content based on existing patterns, right? So it's generating new content. It's not just giving you data that pre-existed. Pre-trained, this is extremely important. You noticed how it had to take all of that content, ingest it, and create this huge database so that it can predict what the next word is. So the pre-trained is very important because it means that a lot of computing power was used up front, but less is needed afterwards for it to translate your prompt into a result. And finally, transformer. That is the neural network that is designed for language processing and for other tools. And what it's doing basically is it's creating connections between all of the words and sentences or aspects of images, and breaking them down into their component parts so that they can be retrieved and used in new configurations. Examples of a transformer would say, well, woman is to man as queen is to king. And some of you may be familiar with that thinking from your LSAT. It also looks as well, big is to biggest, as small is to smallest. So it's looking at both the meaning of the words and also their role in language. So that often if you have something that says big somewhere and then you have the largest thing, they would say the biggest. So these relationships between words and word types commonly appear. And then what these tools are doing is basically mapping all of those into a gigantic database. And they're not just looking at each individual word. Here's a very rough example of a transformer on the bottom in red, where it's taking every word in the sentence or in the chunk and looking at their relationship to one another. So now I'd like you to take a break. We've talked about large language models. We've explained a little bit about how they're generative. What I'd like you to do is go to Bing.com and try using it. Ask it some questions. So ask it something you know about, and it doesn't have to be about law, right? In fact, we're going to talk more about legal AI in the next session, but you should try it with stuff you know about. What is your hobby, your passion, your interest? And see how its results are. Ask it questions you already know the answer to. Is it correct? Is it incorrect? And see if you could play around with the question either to get a better response or something closer to what you wanted. And also you can ask it for citations. So don't forget to ask for citations or sources, especially if it's wrong, to try to figure out, well, what is it relying on that gave me that information that I know is not correct? That concludes this session, and we'll go on to the next session, which is how can we use it in legal practice later.